Welcome to this lecture on art and the male discourse of femininity. In this lecture, we would be discussing the discourse of textual as well as artistic traditions in highlighting several attitudes as well as processes that led to domination of women by men. The narrative of purity and pollution emerged as the primary underlying principle of subjugation that was inculcated in several texts like Dharam Shastras, Manusmriti, as well as the Smriti literature. So, the belief in moral panic or Kali Yuga, a concept that has been discussed in some of the earlier lectures also, needs to be understood. The upper caste women were considered as the objects of moral panic and also as the promoters and carriers of rituals, status, culture, thereby restricting their mobility. Whereas a lower caste man's sexuality was considered as a threat to the upper caste pure blood. So, therefore, one needed to restrict any kind of intermixture of castes, and for that there was a need to keep upper caste women away from any kind of association with men of other castes. Therefore, hypogamy was looked down upon, whereas hypergamy was still permissible. And as has been pointed out by Chakravarti, Uma Chakravarti, in conceptualizing Brahmanical patriarchy in early India, the characterization of women represented a type of patriarchy that resulted in hegemony of upper caste men over three kind of categories. These three categories were upper caste women, the lower caste women, as well as the lower caste men. Now, if we consider the historical period like the Mauryan period or the post-Mauryan period, the Gupta period and thereafter, Uma Chakravarti has traced the historical origin of solidification of Brahmanical rituals of hierarchization as well as patriarchal control over land, especially in the public sphere as well as over women in the private sphere, with the onset of 3rd century CE onwards. So, Uma Chakravarti has contextualized it along with the religious texts as well as several historical developments. She has made an argument that by restraining women from the public sphere, which was achieved over a period of time and in several phases in both early as well as contemporary societies, starting from the hunter-gatherer societies onwards, when women's reproductive power was much respected and was given importance, and hence women were not kept isolated from the productive and economic activities. But the trends changed after the hunter-gathering societies got transformed into settled societies, and there was beginning of agriculture, and there was a property that was created in land. So, it was henceforth that this dichotomy between the public and the private became all the more clearer. As has been pointed out by Gerda Lerner, there is an evidence of controlling female sexuality even in Harappan culture and in the Vedic times, where valorization of war and war heroes was repeatedly attempted, and there was some kind of a consolidation of patriarchy in the most visible forms, though this visibility was much more in the Vedic literature rather than the preceding times. So there was some kind of a romanticization of Vedic culture, literature, and a way of life that was attempted by the 19th century middle class, the intelligentsia, as well as the upper caste males, and this kind of romanticization and valorization continues even in contemporary times. Now, if we consider the lives of women from 2nd century BCE onwards, then the portrayal of women in past and present has several elements of continuity, as can be seen in the various manifestations of Nayika Bhed, that is, the ideal image of a woman in different life situations. So, who was a Nayika? Nayika was basically the feminine object who was a very important subject of several art forms, whether it was sculpture or it was a painting. So, Nayika was only an object of beauty who was driven by her proximity or distance from the male partner, that is Nayaka, and she was rarely depicted independently. Now, this concept of Nayika always being dependent or always being associated with the Nayak, it created a hegemonic influence of Nayak, and different moods of a Nayika that were projected in the sculpture or in the paintings of the period. They showed different moods of Nayika, like the happiness or sadness, or a yearning Nayika, or a longing Nayika, or a playful Nayika. But the prime mover of these several moods of Nayika was none other than the Nayak. So, it was the Nayak who was the real caller of the shots, and this concept of Ashtanayika largely explains this kind of hegemony of the male element. It's imperative to refer to the concept of Ashtanayika, that is the 8 varieties of Nayikas or heroines, as was discussed by Bharata in his classical Sanskrit work on performing arts known as Natya Shastra. This Natya Shastra evolved from 2nd century BCE to 2nd century CE. In today's lecture, I would be sharing with you some of the visuals which are not essentially from early Indian historical period. Most of these visuals belong to probably the Mughal school of paintings or even much later, but the idea is to convey to you the concept of Ashtanayika and how it was the several varieties of heroines, they all depended on a Nayak for their kind of a life story or their kind of existence. So, Ashtanayika is a collective name for 8 types of Nayikas or heroines that were classified by Bharata in his work Natya Shastra, and the 8 Nayikas represent 8 different states or avasthas in relationship to their to her hero or to their Nayak. So, what was a recurrent theme? The recurrent theme was that of a heroine who was in some kind of a relationship with the Nayak, and this theme was constant in Indian painting, in literature, sculpture, as well as in Indian classical dance and music. Now, the Nayak could be a human form or the Nayak could be a divine form. So, these were different kind of benchmarks that were created for this kind of a projection in art. So, discussing different kind of Nayikas along with the visuals, the first kind of Nayika was Vasak Sajja. She was the one who was readying the bed for a night with her lover. So, here there was a complete surrender of a woman towards her lover. The next type was Viraho Kanthika. She was waiting and she was expecting her lover to appear, and so that she could spend some time with her. Then this is the visual of a Kali Ghat painting which depicts a Swadhina Bhartruka with her lover applying Mahavar to her feet. So here the roles are reversed, and the lover is kind of trying to appease the female by decorating her body. Then there was Kalahan Tritya, refusing advances of a lover. So she was kind of indulging in some kind of a kalaha, that is, she was kind of fighting, or she was kind of showing her disapproval. But here also the center, the focus was definitely Nayak. Then there was Khandita, or rebuking her lover. So she was again a Nayika who was probably in a bad mood, and she was not very happy with her lover, so she was kind of showing her disdain. Then there was Proshita Patika, one who was mourning probably over the loss of her partner, or mourning the long absence. Then another interesting Nayika was Abhisarika Nayika. She was the one who was very daring, who would venture out at night to meet her lover. So usually we see that such Nayikas are depicted along with with the snakes or other monstrous creatures who would be walking, they would be walking out of their house in the night, and sometimes the thunder would also be shown in the paintings, and sometimes she is completely drenched in rain, and yet she is walking resolutely and fearlessly, driven by her passion and conviction to meet her lover. Then another kind of Nayika was the yearning woman. A yearning woman was the central theme of Indian paintings, literature, sculpture, classical dance, and even musical compositions. So the different types of Nayikas, like one dressed up for union with the Nayak, or one due to separation who was in great distress and she was kind of feeling sad, and another kind of Nayika who was deceived by a Nayak. So what do all these different depictions of Nayikas indicate? They indicate some kind of a male discourse of femininity. One coupling with lover, etc., became the prominent themes for painters, playwrights and sculptors, etc. And in this entire discourse, it was the male construction of femininity that was the norm. Now, if we look at the murals of Ajanta, which can largely be dated from 2nd century BCE to 7th century CE, in these murals or the paintings, the wall frescoes, the women are portrayed as queens, dancers, mistresses, attendants, apsaras, celestial beings, and thereby the image that is generated again has certain gender connotations. So while these Ajanta caves were largely they had been constructed to highlight spirituality, and they were more kind of related to the aspect of religion, especially Buddhism. However, one also encounters some kind of sexuality and intermingling of sexuality with spirituality in several of these murals. So as we minutely observe some of these Ajanta murals, a majority of them show that while in any particular composition, rest of the characters are clothed, the women characters are largely shown as naked, and they have specific kind of features that are highlighted. The lips, the shape of lips, or the positioning of lips, the positioning of eyes, and the rounded breasts, all these are depicted and projected in a certain and specific way. So we have a number of paintings like a princess and a maid servant, and the artist several artists who had succeeded in reproducing the soft roundedness of the breasts, the curves of the hips of several female figures, and also the turn of the head or the gesture of the hands and the slanting glance of the eyes. So, all these were carefully planned in order to ascribe certain kind of gender specific role. So, these women were definitely naked amongst the clothes. It was not as if all the subjects of a painting were naked. So, there were women who were largely shown naked, and most of Ajanta heroines are depicted naked or in near nudity, while all the others in the same scene are shown as clothed. Again, one can discuss a visual of Queen Shivali, which was from Mahajataka, Cave 1. Which again was this kind of a depiction. On closer scrutiny, as one talks about these beautiful Ajanta murals, there is an attempt to highlight the sensuous and the sublime beauty of women, though the central theme of these cave paintings was religious. So, it appears a dichotomy that here there was a place which had been planned as a religious center, and there was lot of spirituality that was working behind these cave architectures, but the murals that were developed here were full of sensuous depiction, and they highlighted the sublime beauty of women. So, having discussed these interesting themes, now we go on to the Gupta and the post-Gupta period as to what was indicative and what were the gender roles that had been ascribed during this period. So, for women, the study of fine arts like dance, music, painting, as well as practice of innumerable crafts continued during the Gupta as well as the post-Gupta period. And here we have reference to Kama Sutra by Vatsyayan, who enumerated the duties of a housewife. So, the duties of a housewife were several, like planting trees, flowering and fruit plants, as well as taking care of medicinal herbs, cooking, spinning, grinding, and dealing with servants, and also taking care of cattle, taking care of the domestic pets, as well as the household expenses. And Vatsyayan listed 64 arts that were to be mastered by women, which included not only these household chores, but also reading of books like preparing medicines, recitation of the correct recitation of shlokas, and knowledge of literature, dramas, knowledge of science, as well as the physical exercise and development of body. So, Vatsyayan kind of indicated that these accomplishments could also be used by a woman for their vocation. A woman who was gifted with all these could also maintain herself if her husband was in exile or if she was widowed. So, it was permissible for a woman to kind of acquire some proficiency in these various arts and then earn a livelihood out of them. Now, coming to the issue of courtesans. Courtesans occupied a special status in the society and cultivated various types of arts and crafts. So, there is a very interesting depiction in Dasa Kumar Charita of courtesans who were instructed in the arts of dancing, acting, playing musical instruments like veena, as well as singing, painting, preparing perfumes, arrangement of flowers, as well as reading, and also witty conversation, knowledge in grammar, logical reasoning, as well as astrology. So, it was not as if a courtesan was considered to be merely a sexual object who was there to satisfy the needs of the client. A courtesan was expected to be a polished woman who was supposed to charm everyone who was around her with these kind of qualities and these kind of indulgences. Now, Vatsyayana also kind of indicated that the several accomplishments that a woman must have should not only be restrictive, they should not be restrictive only for a domestic kind of a life. So, he kind of permitted women, if they gained perfection in most of these arts, and if they were able to master the reading of books or the preparing of medicines, then they could also practice them in order to earn a livelihood. But these kind of explanations or these kind of existences have not really been researched upon much by the scholars. We generally ascribe very specific and very limited roles that probably existed in ancient Indian society, but here we have so many texts which have highlighted the exceptional role that women could have played and they must have played during several historical periods, and especially with the invasions that were on a rise in the post-Mauryan period, and with the influx of outsiders and with the creation of a mixed kind of society, these changes were becoming all the more visible. So, for women, the study of fine arts like dance, music or any other kind of artistic accomplishment was not only to make her a dancing woman or to make her a woman who was out there to entertain the others, but it was also to inculcate some special qualities in a woman to kind of highlight her inner abilities and capabilities. Now, going back to the depiction of women in Ajanta and Ellora paintings. Now, these can also be very important source for highlighting the kind of cultural efflorescence that was there, the study of dressing, the study of ornaments, as well as the use of colors, the use of posture, the use of gaze, the idea of gaze, who was the image looking at or who was looking at the image of a woman. All these have been studied by several art historians and especially from a gender perspective. Now, this would be a very interesting field of study that I would be taking up in some of the future lectures as to how, if we apply psychology and how if we apply sociological understanding and also philosophical explanation to these various works of art, then one can kind of understand these paintings or several sculptures that exist from the past from a gender point of view. Thank you all.